Welcome back to Bombastic Nation and Ting and Ting and Ting. Back with some more vibes for you. I'm Mr. Giant, and we're going to do part 5 in the history of Russia. And I do believe this is the last in this series here, man. I hope you guys are doing great out there. It's Sunday where I am. You know what I mean? I know this is going all over the world. It's Sunday where I am. And I hope you guys had a great weekend so far, and you're looking forward to the week coming up, and you're ready to go out there and spread some love and some peace and tig. You know what I mean? Might sound cliche, but we got to keep pumping that out so that people could start realizing instead of looking for the negative, they go for the positive and tig. You know what I'm going to say? So, History of Russia Part 5. Yeah. We're going to get into this. Let's YouTube and simmer.
In 1881, Russian Emperor Alexander II was assassinated by left-wing terrorists in St. Petersburg.
Left wing, 1888, 81.
Today, the place where he was fatally wounded is marked by the magnificent Church of the Savior on Spilled Blood. Alexander II had been a reformer, hailed as the liberator for freeing Russia's serfs. But his son and successor, Alexander III, believed his father's reforms had unleashed dangerous forces within Russia that ultimately led to his death.
The dangerous forces is called the rich. They wanted to keep their serfs. You understand what I'm saying? So they killed the man who freed the serfs. You know what I mean? Those are the dangerous forces. You know what I mean? It's funny how, like, the upper echelon of society go, they're the dangerous sources. They're trying to fight against us and our prosperity and blah, 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 blah. And they say our prosperity, like if everybody's prospering in the situation, when everybody isn't. You know what I mean? But then they have the power, so they're going to go, oh, you're an insurrectionist. Oh, you're, you know, whatever, going against the grain. What's normal? What's normal to them, you know? Big fancy parties, expensive cars and stuff, that's normal to them. It's not normal to us. Unfortunately, some poor people, and I can see it right now in the society I live in, will back the rich. Why do the rich have to get taxed more? Why do the rich do this? And why do the rich have to pay the poor more than they deserve? I hear that kind of stuff every day. You know, it's a double type of thing, because then they complain about not getting paid enough, but then they complain that the rich have to pay them more. It's really crazy out here right now, I can tell you that. Let's continue here. Let me not babble.
As emperor, he publicly vowed to reassert autocratic rule, declaring that, in the midst of our great grief, the voice of God orders us to undertake courageously the task of ruling, with faith in the strength and rightness of autocratic power.
Bringing in the God into it, you know? That's what control people.
The Tsar's
even though they don't
police,
believe.
the so-called Okranka, was ordered to infiltrate Russia's many revolutionary groups. Those found guilty of plotting against the government were hanged or sent into internal exile in Siberia.
Yeah, Siberia. Woo!
Alexander III was a pious man who supported the Orthodox Church and the assertion of a strong Russian national identity.
Don't terrorize me, you know what I'm saying? But leaders always use the Bible.
Jews became victims of this policy. They'd already been targeted in murderous race riots known as pogroms, after false rumors were spread that they were responsible for the assassination of the emperor. Now, the government expelled 20,000 Jews from Moscow, and many who could began to leave the country. Over the next 40 years, around 2 million Jews would leave Russia, most bound for the USA. Concerned by the growing power of Germany, Russia signed an alliance with France, both sides promising military aid if the other was attacked. Sergei Witte was appointed Russia's new Minister of Finance. His reforms helped to modernize the Russian economy and encourage foreign investment, particularly from its new ally, France. French loans helped Russia to develop its industry and infrastructure.
They're building some stuff.
Siberian Railway. Completed in 1916, it remains the world's longest railway line, running 5,772 miles from Moscow to Vladivostok.
That'd be a nice trip. Just take one long trip.
Was succeeded by his son, Nicholas II. His coronation was marred by tragedy when 1,400 people were crushed to death
Wow.
at an open-air celebration in Moscow. China granted Russia the right to build a naval base at Port Arthur. When China faced a major revolt known as the Boxer Rebellion, Russia moved troops into Manchuria under the pretext of defending Port Arthur from the rebels. This brought Russia into conflict with Japan, who also had designs over Manchuria and Korea. The
Everybody's trying to get
made
territory.
a surprise attack on Port Arthur, then defeated the Russian army at the giant Battle of Mukden.
Well, the Japanese ain't no
Russia's
joke.
Baltic Fleet, meanwhile, had sailed halfway around the world to reach the Pacific, where it was immediately annihilated at the Battle of Tsushima.
Japan in action. Wow.
Russia was left with no option but to sign a humiliating peace, brokered by US President Theodore Roosevelt. Meanwhile, the Tsar faced another crisis much closer to home. In St. Petersburg, a strike by steel workers had escalated, and plans were made for a mass demonstration. Tens of thousands of protesters marched to the Winter Palace to present a petition to the Tsar, asking for better workers' rights and more political freedom. But instead, troops opened fire on the crowds, killing more than 100. Bloody Sunday, as it became known, led to more
I've heard of
strikes
that.
and unrest
I have
across
heard
the
of this.
country. The crew of the battleship.
As a matter of fact, we had our own version of a Bloody Sunday on my island. I remember that not as vividly as I remember Bloody Monday, I think it was called. And but we had our own Bloody Sunday there. We had our own version of the Secret Police. They used to call them the Mongoose Gang. And that's crazy. Whenever workers decide to rebel or revolt, or whatever they want to call it, but fight for their rights, things could go south real quick, depending on who is in charge, what government leaders you have.
Unrest across the country. The crew of the battleship Potemkin mutinied, killing their officers and taking control of the ship. To defuse the crisis, Nicholas II reluctantly issued the October Manifesto, drafted under the supervision of Sergei Witte. It promised an elected assembly and new political rights, including freedom of speech, and was welcomed by most moderates. Russia's first constitution was drafted the next year. For the first time, the Tsar would share power with an elected assembly, the State Duma, though the Tsar had the right to veto its legislation and dissolve it
At any time, maintaining the power.
Sergei Witte finally lost the Tsar's confidence and was dismissed. The Tsar's new Prime Minister, Stolypin, introduced land reforms to help the peasants, while dealing severely with Russia's would-be revolutionaries, so much so that the hangman's noose got a new nickname, Stolypin's necktie.
Wow.
But
I have to admit, never heard of
several
Stolypin.
attempts on his life, Stolypin was shot and killed by an assassin at the Kiev Opera House. Meanwhile, Grigory Rasputin, a Siberian faith healer, had joined the imperial family's inner circle, thanks to his unique ability.
Heard a lot about
to ease the
Rasputin.
suffering of the Tsar's hemophiliac son, Alexei. Despite sporadic acts of terrorism, Russia now had the fastest growing economy in Europe, Agricultural and industrial output were on the rise. Most ordinary Russians remained loyal to the Tsar and his family. Russia's future seemed bright.
World War One.
In 1914, in Sarajevo, a Slav nationalist assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, sparking a European crisis. When Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, Emperor Nicholas ordered the Russian army to mobilize, to show his support for a fellow Slav nation. Austria-Hungary's ally, Germany, saw Russian mobilization as a threat and declared war. Europe's network of alliances came into effect, and soon all the major powers were marching to war. World War I had begun. Russia experienced a wave of patriotic fervor. The capital, St. Petersburg, was even renamed Petrograd to sound less German. An early Russian advance into East Prussia ended with heavy defeats at Tannenberg and the Masurian Lakes. There was greater success against Austria-Hungary, but that too came at a high price. Russian losses forced the army to make a general retreat in 1915. In 1916, Russia's Brusilov offensive against Austro-Hungarian forces was one of the most successful Allied attacks of the war. But losses were so heavy that the Russian army was unable to launch any more major operations. In Petrograd, Rasputin, whose alleged influence over the Tsar's family was despised by certain Russian aristocrats, was murdered, possibly with the help of British agents.
Revolution!
The war put intolerable strains on Russia. At the front, losses were enormous, while in the cities, economic mismanagement led to rising prices and food shortages. In Petrograd, the workers' frustration led to strikes.
It's amazing how things were going so good and all of a sudden, whoop, you know what I mean? And it seems like all these wars are the catalyst for all of this, you know what I mean? Certain places prosper and certain places just delve right into chaos and famine and you know, things like that. It's just weird how war affects everything around it. It's just everything. And it's not just in the world we live in, it's not just going to affect the country the war is in, it's going to affect the whole world around it. When you take in consideration the type of weapons that could be used, plus the dependency on trade and essential goods, you know, a war somewhere could totally, you know, stalemate the world in general, you know what I mean? It's just crazy. And that's why, you know, since we depend on each other, we should try to get along, because we do depend on each other. People talk about globalization, blah 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 blah. I mean, listen, man, trade has been global for years. I mean, I just watched the Mali Empire. They've been trading all over. You know what I mean? They were trying to find ways to get to India and trade with India when Columbus came around and discovered all this land. So when people are sitting here talking about, oh, this is all global stuff and globalization and all of that, we always depended on each other. Once we realized that other people have the things we need and we could trade, we started to depend on each other. And I mean, across the seas, because even in big landmass, people traded all the time. You know, like in Africa, they traded all the time with different tribes and stuff, unless they're at war. And usually the wars are for the resources. So, you know, when people keep saying that they're trying to make the whole world one big place, we already one big place. We all depend on each other. Certain places have things that other places need, and vice versa. But the problem is people are trying to control it so they could get rich. And that's everybody. That's all of us. That's not just America. That's not just Russia. That's not just China. That's everybody's trying to control something. You know, except for really itty bitty countries like mine, we ain't got the manpower or the military power to try to control anything but what little we have where we are. And recently there's like, they say there's oil off of Grenada and where I'm from, and people want to go there and drill. But the question is, who is going to prosper from that? Is the local people going to prosper from that? Or is the government going to get handouts and then they terrorize the people while they get rich? I'm not saying that's what they're going to do, but when you really check it out, that's what kind of happens. It happens a lot in Africa. You know what I mean? And a lot of other small countries. You know, you see the politicians are getting rich and the people are struggling. Because in order to get stuff passed, to go drill or to go mine whatever they want, they have to go through the law. And the law is controlled by the politicians. And I could imagine how easy it is to go, well, you know, I'm going to get a piece of the pie, you know. It's just, there need to be some distinct checks and balances, I guess. You know what I mean?
Mismanagement led to rising prices and food shortages. In Petrograd, the workers' frustration led to strikes and demonstrations. Troops ordered to disperse the crowds refused and joined the protesters instead. The government had lost control of the capital. On board the imperial train at Pskov, senior politicians and generals told the emperor he must abdicate, or Russia would descend into anarchy and lose the war. Nicholas accepted their advice and renounced the throne in favor of his brother, Grand Duke Michael, who effectively declined the offer.
Wow.
400 years of Romanov rule were at an end. Russia was now a republic. A provisional government took power, but could not halt Russia's slide into economic and military chaos. Workers, soldiers, and peasants elected their own councils, known as Soviets. The Petrograd Soviet was so powerful, it was effectively a rival government, especially as discontent with the provisional government continued to grow. The Bolsheviks, under Vladimir Lenin, attracted growing support with their radical proposals for an immediate end to the war, the redistribution of land, and transfer of power to the Soviets. In October, they launched a coup, masterminded by Leon Trotsky. Bolshevik Red Guards stormed the Winter Palace, where the provisional government met, and arrested its members.
Revolution.
And the Bolsheviks were now in charge. Russia had been thrown upon a bold and dangerous course. Under a Marxist-inspired revolutionary party, it would now seek to create the world's first communist state. But first, it would have to survive the chaos and slaughter of one of history's bloodiest civil wars. Thank you.
Wow. The build-up was kind of the music, the storytelling. That was kind of cool. I'm gonna leave a link in the description. Go down there and check it out. You'll see all the series 1 through 5. I do believe if you click on this here. So you know, go check it out. See what go on there and thing. You know what I mean? And in the meantime, all you take care of each other. All right. Cool runnings.